Hey, welcome back to the Field and Faith podcast. I'm Chris. With me as always,
Luke here.
All right. Now, we had a really fantastic time this last episode talking with Justin Hagee, going over his new book, which is scheduled to be coming out here into the future. It was his first time ever being on a podcast, and we just enjoyed the 3 times. If you haven't checked out that episode, make sure and check out that episode because what Justin talks about as a man, whether you're dating or you're married, is so awesome. But today we're going to kind of switch ships because we did an activity on Sunday with a group of guys for the very first time, and I'm going to kick it over to Luke to kind of explain what's kind of going on within Field and Faith and why we decided to kind of do this and why it's so important for guys to get together and hang out across different levels of life and different age groups and fun stuff like that.
Yeah, when we launched Field and Faith, the intention was it was for men, period, and we had to go the 13 to 17-year-old route. I mean, we'd have to, but we chose to for liability reasons and really seeing that kind of struggle firsthand being the hardest part. But we always wanted to have some sort of component for men, 18 and over. And it has finally felt like a time with me jumping in full time and, having this opportunity. It was just like, dude, it's time. Like, we can't keep wasting time and putting this off. It's time. And going and setting up at an event and then having all these guys just come up and be like, man, I need this. I'm like, I know you need this. Like, there's a lot of guys that need this. I need this. So it was time to launch an 18 and over program.
And so we went out Sunday, right after church. And it was awesome. Like, I think there was 3 or 4 churches kind of represented there, from different backgrounds. Oasis, Jesus Church, Pillar. Was there anyone from anywhere else?
Dream City too, I think, was there as well. So yeah, it's cool to see, it doesn't have to be a church ministry. I got to ask that question, oh, are you affiliated with any church? Well, yeah, this is a church I go to, but we're not affiliated with any churches. Why does it have to be a church thing? It's not a church thing. It's a guys group.
Yeah. And, we went out, just past Lake Pleasant and, pulled out the shotguns. And we just did an afternoon shooting. And so for some of the guys, it was their first time shooting. Some guys, they had shot a few times, but it had been a while. And then one of the guys was like, I've been 2 times already this week or whatever it was. And so we had so many different levels of people on different walks of life. And, you had a 45-minute car ride out there. And we both drove separate. I took some of the guys, you took some of the guys, and we had conversation, no dead silence from the time we started till the time that we got there. Just introducing ourselves, seeing where walks of life were and different situations. And I had a conversation in my car where one of the guys was like, oh man, I needed to hear that. I was like, I don't know why I brought it up. Holy Spirit was just like, hey, you're going to have an awkward conversation about your divorce. And the divorce was something that one of the guys was kind of going through. And he's just like, man, I just needed to hear somebody else had to go through a struggle, but God had brought him out better. Cause he's like, dude, you're way happier. I was like, oh yeah, I'm much happier post my divorce, because of everything that had gone on. And it really just brought us into a really unique kind of position, but it just goes to show, man, it doesn't matter what walk of life that you're in. When Christ is the center, community can build around that. And most guys want to do guy things.
Yeah, we always want to do guy things. And I think the reality is we're all going through the same stuff. Because if you're not going through it currently, you're going to go through it at some point or another, which is cool for me to be I think I was the only dad there and one of the few married guys that were there to be able to speak life of yeah, this is actually what it looks like on the father side of it. And to be able to show that as yeah, you're not going to go through this now, but just fair warning, this is going to happen in the next couple of years as you start to have kids and as your relationship starts to change because of that. And this is a man's time, man. It's something that we have to do. We don't do it enough. We talk about it. And, especially since we've transitioned to different churches and all that kind of stuff from our own group, we've noticed even the difference within ourselves changing of, hey, I don't get to see you 2, 3, 4 times a week because we're not showing up to church and doing work together. It's oh yeah, we actually have to schedule and plan these things out and make time for it. And I noticed even this week myself of man, I'm just kind of in a funk. I would love to go out and hang out with the guys, but I don't know if I can because they're busy and I'm busy and there's just too much stuff going on. And guys need to be around guys. a lot more than we think we do. Once a month is not enough. Once every 2 weeks is not enough. Once a week is not enough. Actually, funny fact, Oxford did a study on this and said 2 times a week is a minimum that guys should spend together. They actually did a study of this back in 2013, and they went through it, and they said, it's okay for men to talk. They can talk as much as they want, but it does them no justice. They literally need to get together at least twice a week, and they need to do activities. They need to do other stuff. They need to banter. They need to be witty. They need to tell jokes. They need competition, and it will literally make you live longer.
Oh, totally. And I've read that exact same study. And when I taught psychology and I would bring something like that up, obviously when you're in a high school setting or something like that, that idea or that notion seems so foreign. It's like, what do you mean you need to get together with your guys? Like, aren't you together with your guys like all the time? And it's like, no, like when you get older and you're working full time, a lot of the times what ends up taking place is you go to work and then you come home from work and then you just repeat that cycle over and over and over again. And getting together with somebody who's in a different stage of life, whether they're married or have kids or have a girlfriend or have a fiance, wife, whatever the case may be, like it becomes almost a job in a lot of situations. Like, hey, send it out to the group chat. What are you guys doing this weekend? Anyone want to go and do something? And you got guys from different walks. Oh, I've got this plan. I got that plan. They're doing other things. But at the exact same time, the necessity of maybe having almost a routine of, hey, every single Wednesday or something like that, like we would do in a church group, say like, hey, we have youth group every single Wednesday night. Now I know I'm going there, but like guys will be like, hey, we're going to go out, we're going to try a new restaurant or do something like that every single Wednesday night, because a lot of us lose, the sports teams, we lose the activities as we get older. And if we're not throwing ourselves out there with an old group of friends that meet up all these times, there's just a lot of us that get lonely, and it's an epidemic. I mean, one of the leading causes of death over the last 5 years has just been slowly rising is one, drug overdose has surpassed cancer as the leading causes of death, and then suicide within male categories. And that epidemic of, hey, I need to fill the void, or suicide is going to clearly be linked in a lot of different categories. But we neglect a lot of the fact because men don't have that capacity. So I wanted to get your thoughts on that, Luke. I know you read a lot about young men. We obviously have started these programs. But what are the things that you've seen even after this event? I just think there's so much more. What are the things that young men are striving for, looking for, but not getting with the way that the world currently is operating?
It's just loneliness, right? We just brought that up. Loneliness is one of the most searched things for men on Google. That term and that phrase of why am I lonely? How can I beat this? How can I find a group? Is one of the most searched things for men. And suicide rates for men, 60 to 70% of suicides are men. Yeah. And even thinking about it this week, talking to my daughter, and she's just oh yeah, this girl's dad killed himself. And this, for the fact that I went through school and I couldn't think of a single person that killed himself in high school. Right. And now I've talked to my 13-year-old daughter, and she's had 2 or 3 friends within her small community of dads that have killed themselves. It shook me. It was shaking me this week, man. I'm just thinking about it. Dude, there's so many guys out there, and I guarantee you they didn't have a close friend group. Or if they did, they probably didn't see them enough, or it was college friends or whatever, and times have changed and they had kids, and now they're hanging out with their kids' friends and all that kind of stuff. And it's just, guys need to be with each other. We need to challenge each other. It needs to be a constant thing. And seeing this so much, even after spending time with those guys this week, and having, some of the messages come in of man, I needed this. I didn't realize how much I needed this. This was a lot of fun. And then even this morning, I was just okay, I can't wait till the next activity for these guys and for myself. So hey, guys, I'm going to be at a coffee shop this day from this time. If anybody just wants to come hang out, I'll be there. Yeah. Just because guys need to be together. We need to talk it out, because we're not going to talk about it. We're going to bottle it up. We're going to isolate, and then sin is going to come in, and whatever else is going to come in, and the thoughts are going to come in, and it's just going to unravel everything that we accomplished in the couple hours we were out there,
Yeah. And I mean, there's so much of that now to where it's like, I mean, I talked to a few of the guys and like, oh yeah, I'm working remote. And I know how that is. Like, if it wasn't for my wife kind of being around the house these last few weeks, but she's just started a new job. And now today it was like kind of lonely. Like, normally my wife's in there playing with the dog, doing her thing, whatever she was doing in preparation for her new job. But now it's just like, it was like eerily quiet in the house, and it just felt different, even doing work. Like, so the fact of like, hey, let's get together for the guys who like work remotely. Let's find a coffee shop that has decent enough Wi-Fi, and just like being around other people like during those like odd times, like, oh, what are you working on? What are you doing? Those are the types of things like, hey, one, A, you're not alone, like, but B, that camaraderie of guys is so amazing. Cause like, I totally saw that, because these guys literally met in a parking lot for the most part, unless like Ishmael, which we got to go into that story, because like, you didn't even put this together, did you?
Oh no, I met Ishmael, and I've been like mentoring him and kind of meeting once a week and just talking. And then I was just like, hey, let's put an activity together. I'll put it out there and you do the rest. Like, I know you know some guys, so just invite them.
Yeah, because like the moment I met him, Ishmael just was like literally like the guy. I told my wife, I go, he's the guy that hundreds of people come to Christ through, because he's like the outgoing, happy, big old smile on his face, like, hey, this is this, like purposefully like spreading love through his means of like communication. And it was just so cool. I was like, dude, right off the bat, I was like, I want to be friends with this guy. This is the guy that like brings out joy. But I also know, even within that, because I've been there, like, oh, dude, you always seemed happy. You always seemed happy. Because like when I was really struggling with my own mental health, I always tried to be the happiest one in the room. And that emotional like toil of trying to be the happiest one in the room was exhausting. And, just with conversations, like, we know we can't always be at these high levels. We can't always be at these things. So it was just good to like kick back with a bunch of dudes, be honest, talk about where we were at in life. And the honest conversation was some of the best I've had in a long time, because these guys didn't know each other. So they were just sharing where they were at in life.
Well, I think it's the idea too that we talked about a couple weeks ago, like having your cup filled. Like, yeah, if you're trying to be happy all the time and you're trying to put on face, and if you're a man, if you're a dad, if you're a father, if you're a boss and being an employee, a good employee, like, you're having to put on a show constantly of, hey, I'm strong and I'm tough and I'm this and that, and that's what the world's telling us all the time. And then you show up in these groups and it's like, yeah, these guys are tougher than me. These guys are way better off in their walk or farther along in their faith walk, and these guys are making more money. They might, they drive nicer cars than me, and like, we get so spun out in our heads of like, man, I am not enough and my cup is empty. And then you just get around these guys and you're just like, the reality is like, yeah, he's probably struggling. I know I'm struggling, even though I look like I'm well put together. I was really struggling yesterday. You know what I mean? Like, these guys are going to fill my cup just as much as I'm going to fill theirs. And it's so awesome to be able to have that, because it's so needed.
Yeah. And like, even when we were shooting, man, I just had the biggest smile, because I only shot a few rounds, but the majority of what we were doing was throwing clays. And it was never one guy being like, oh, come on, man. It was, dude, dude, you just missed right behind. Like, they were watching out for one another. Like, you had one guy who was spotting, one guy who was like, oh, you were just under that one, or you were just, we had taught them how to spot, where the, what's the little plastic piece called? The wad, yeah, like where the wad was traveling. Oh, you were ahead of that one. Oh, you were behind that one. You remember, track it this way, do it this way. And so a lot of that process was everyone was kind of learning. And just the excitement of when someone clobbered a clay for the first time, it was just like everyone stopped and celebrated with that person. And they were like, wait, did I get it? And it was like, dude, you crushed it. And then I'm like, what are you looking at if you're not looking at the thing that you're shooting at? Because it was just so exciting to kind of see, different people that didn't really know each other, like, come out and support one another. And just to see like, oh, we're not as divisive or competitive with one another, but it was like very, very supportive of one another. And we just don't get that, I think, a lot of the times in society, because it's always the gung-ho competition based. But doing an activity like we did just facilitated this. And I'm hoping like the word of mouth begins to spread of like, hey, this is what we do over at Field and Faith, and that there is a huge market for what we can provide, as long as we can find more shotgun shells, because that was actually really hard. Driving around to different Walmarts trying to find shotguns, and it was just like, oh, I got to grab more and more and more of these.
But it's such a unique and like one of a kind of experience, because it's like, I'm not going to go home right now and I'm not going to get that challenge of having to accomplish something and then having a bunch of people cheer me on. Like, yeah, my wife and my kids will cheer me on, but it's different. And I can't go to church and have the same respect to the guys that are at the church to come around me and to cheer me up and to cheer me on. Like, yeah, they're going to, because they're brothers in Christ, but this is different. It's the same thing. Like, if you go to school right now, you're not going to have the same friend, like the friends that are going to do that. This is like so different. It's so outside the scales, and it's what it's in the Bible. Like, we're supposed to come around each other and support each other, and like iron sharpens iron. Yeah, we're cheering each other on, but we're also challenging each other. And we're also challenging each other not from a physical standpoint of shooting guns and stuff, but like from a mental health standpoint, emotional standpoint, conversational standpoint. And like, that is what we need. We don't understand it, but we need it.
Oh, 100%. 100%. And I think, I wrote an entire book for the year that I was traveling, and the components of it, literally one of the major components of it is community. And whether people want to bag on religion, the idea of gathering together once a week, twice a week for Bible studies, for a conversation, is that element. You brought up a study from 2013 where men have to get together 2 times a week. Dude, I don't know. Did you read the comment section?
I did it.
Dude, because the comment section on those articles are what are terrifying, because it's exactly what men kind of have to deal with a lot of the times, which is the criticism of it. Oh, just another excuse for boys to get together. Oh, just another reason. Like, well, okay, on one hand, we have this crazy epidemic of guys who are self-harming themselves in multiple different categories of drug abuse, and then rates of suicide getting higher and higher and higher. But at the exact same time, when we do step out and say, hey, I need help. Hey, you know what? This study shows this is something that I need. The criticism of, well, what about me? The girls are going to come in and say, oh, it's just another excuse for the guys. But rather than saying, hey, why don't we test this out for a while? Why don't you go ahead and meet with the guys? Why don't you facilitate this as a means of building yourself up? Come back and reassess, because dude, I came back to my wife at the night, and she was like, how was it? I was like, dude, it was such a good day. And it wasn't this look necessarily, and I don't want to like put my wife in a bad position, but it wasn't like a I'm happy for you look. It was just like, well, was it more fun than when we went shooting? And it's just like, those are 2 different things. Like, I was just as excited when I went shooting with my wife, John, and his wife, Trisha, as I was doing this, but it was different seeing something, because it was for a stranger who literally could give me nothing. And, we supplied everything. As far as I know, we didn't charge them, but I went out and bought extra shells, bought this. When you told me how many guys, I assumed you were going to under-prepare, which I think I was right. And I bought 300 extra 12 gauge shells, and I bought an extra 500 things of clay. And I don't know what we came out with afterwards, but it was like, dude, the last thing I want is for us to stop because we didn't have enough. And we stopped just because we were just like, and everyone, I think, was feeling the pinch of how many rounds they put into a shoulder. But we were all laughing about the bruises. We were all laughing about like different things throughout. And it just kept being said over and over again, just in the background. Man, I needed this. Like, audibly from somebody, man, I needed this, over and over and over again. And it was one time that I think for a lot of these young men get to experience, like, man, what it would be like if I had a life group of a group of guys who went out and did things on a regular basis, like camping, like fishing, like shooting, what would life be like? And I think there'd be more drive in facilitating happiness within groups of guys.
Yeah, and we can't just go home. Like, I love my wife, but there's just certain things that I don't share emotionally with her that
Totally.
I know that I can't. Like, if I told her how depressed I was on certain days, it would probably scare her.
Yeah.
To the point where she'd be like, do I need to check you into mental? Like, no, this is a part of my life, and this is something that I've dealt with for a long time. Yeah, I'm okay, and I'm not going to do anything crazy, but like, this is where my head's at right now, and you're not going to understand this, and it's going to freak you out. And this is why I'm a little bit off sometimes. And, every 6 months I might be in this place, but it's like, I can go to these guys and know that, hey, they are 100% just like me and dealing with the exact same stuff. I think that's why too, like men's retreats, for instance, they're so successful. For like 3 days, guys go up, praise and worship, challenge each other mentally, emotionally, physically, because there's always some sort of hike or games. And then we sit around a campfire and we just talk and we share stories. And like, guys come down the mountain from a men's retreat, but their life's changed, drastically changed. They've had experiences with God. They've had all kinds of different stuff come through, like all these cracks that have been beginning to open and heal that have been there for so long. And then they come down the mountain and they fall into old habits. Like, I don't even know the percentage of guys that fall into old habits. Like, it's got to be over 90% of guys that come out of men's retreat feeling amazing and then within 2 weeks fall completely back to where they were. And that's because men's retreats are highly successful because of they have guys together doing what they're supposed to do for 3 straight days. Yeah, we can't have 3 straight days every week. Let's be real. But we can get together twice a week. And if we did that after a men's retreat, if we had a men's retreat and then had guys get together, hey, Tuesday we got our meeting. Oh, hey, Thursday we're working out together. Oh, hey, guys, next Sunday we're doing a barbecue at my house. How successful would a men's retreat be after that? You would have a whole year come around for the next men's retreat, and you wouldn't be dealing with the same crap that guys are dealing with every men's retreat, because that's what happens. We deal with the same stuff year after year after year because we fall into old habits because we don't have our communities.
Yeah. I mean, I've seen that. I mean, I don't know how many camps that I've been to, especially with like the youth and the like younger people as well. But again, it's like, hey, here's all of these camps, but the moment you turn 18 and you're out of high school, there's no longer that. Like, it's very rare, unless you're going to a much bigger church, which I went to in college. I don't know if you did, like the young adult groups and stuff like that, but it was the same thing. You went away for one weekend, and that was meant to like try and charge your battery spiritually, emotionally for a longer period of time. But it just never would sustain itself. It was this massive high and then the come down effect. And we always said, like, as I got older, I was like, man, you guys are going to walk away from this mountain basically feeling like the world is at your fingertips. You're never going to backslide. You're never going to do anything. And I go, but you're not going to have breakout groups again this week. You're not going to have small group discussions. You're not going to have these things. We set those up here for you at camp. But how do we make sure that this continues when we come down from the mountain, when we get done with camp, when we now go back into our regular lives? And I think we have faltered with that because either A, one person or two people are trying to put it all together, and that's a lot of a burden, a lot of load, rather than it being like a group of guys being like, hey, just so you guys know, I'm working remotely this day, this day, this day. Come on over to the coffee shop if you want to like kind of hang out during that time. And that type of mentality is what I think a lot of guys need, but facilitating that can be a lot of work. And then sharing life stories, dude, I mean, carrying other people's loads, literally burdens of other men, is tiring. It really is. But it's also what we're called to do. And it didn't seem like anyone was like, oh man, someone unloaded on us. No, it was just like, hey, this is where we're at. And no one judged them for it. No one put anything onto it. And it was just like, hey, if you need help, if you ever need somebody to reach out to for any circumstance, like, here's an opportunity. But like internally, I don't know about you, I never reach out to anybody, like, unless it's like a really close friend and given an opportunity, like 2 guys hanging out, having a beer, which is what that study said, dude, that opens up a chasm of doors for opportunities of what they could talk about.
I think the old life model, it was semi-successful, right? Your parents showed you how to live life and they forced you to have friends, whether you wanted to as a kid, and they made you do stuff. And like, not give you everything. And then you went off to college and you kind of had this like, okay, I have to figure out who I am now. And then you became friends with people around you in these groups, and that's became your lifelong friends. Like you think about some of the older people, like older than us, I would even say, like our generation really didn't do it as much. But people like, you talk about your college friends, and that's who you stayed friends with for your entire life. Yeah. But now you have kids going through school. Parents aren't forcing them to do anything. They're handing them whatever they want, whatever they need. Now they're getting to college. A lot of them are doing online college, and if they are going to college, they're not making friends with the right people, and they're not being forced to do anything. And then if they're like actually trying to find groups, it's like, well, let's just do it on social media. Let's find friends on social media. Let's find friends on video games across the country or whatever. And there's no place that we're being forced into a place to actually have to communicate, which is something we have to do. And like the older we get and the more technology gets to where it is, the less we are going to communicate. Even though we can literally communicate with anyone in the world right now, you literally cannot have this conversation with somebody.
Yeah. I think it was like, dude, just wait till social media kind of opens up the realms of connectiveness. Oh, the world is going to be so connected. And we've never been more disconnected than we have right now. Like because I can sit in my room and shoot a text to somebody, it replaces I'm going to have to drive over and like have that conversation with somebody. One of the students at the school that I work at, he got a phone and he was so excited. But on the phone itself, it's a flip phone because it's like the Jewish school. They're not allowed to have smartphones, so that they all call them dumb phones because all it does is call. And so he can't search the internet. He can't go on anything. He can't download any apps, and it's talk only. And these kids, I was talking to them because we went on a hike last week for my class. Yeah, we get to go hiking as a part of Arizona history. And we went for a hike at Piestewa Peak. And one of the kids was just explaining to me, and he's like, yeah, it's really lonely for the 2 months that we're not in school because they're not in community. They're not doing all these things. So while they complain all the time about having to be at school for as long as they have to be at school for, then at the exact same time, you remove the guys getting together, and there's that sense of loneliness and what that feels like. And they're experiencing that at 16, 17 years old. And that only exemplifies once you're out of school so much more.
Yeah, you don't have that set up structure where somebody's forcing you to be in that place. It's like, man, wives, if you love your husband, if you're listening to this, make him get in a men's group. Whether he likes it or not, it's going to be uncomfortable at first, but he needs to be around other guys. Let him go hang out with his friends. Don't give him a hard time. Yeah, if he's going out and drinking every night, okay, yeah, that's a problem. That's a different conversation that needs to be had, or if he's golfing all the time. But there's a reason why he's golfing, right? A, he wants to be outdoors. He just doesn't really realize it. But B, he wants to have that competition. He wants to have that banter, and he wants to be around his friends. If he's drinking a bunch and doing other stuff, that's a problem, and he doesn't know how to work around that yet. But there's a reality. He's trying to do what he needs to do as a man, whether he actually knows it or not. He's internalizing it and saying, hey, these are the things that I need, but I don't know how to actually put this out in the air and put it out in the open with you.
Yeah. And I mean, and like anything else, man, it comes down to like understanding your priorities and understanding what your responsibility is and all those. Like, yeah, you can go golfing, but realize that there's also sets of responsibilities that come along with that. You know, in order to go golfing, it means doing a little bit of extra work in between. Both of us had to, you know, confer with our wives that this was okay. I invited somebody who was married the day of, and his wife was mad that she couldn't come along. She's like, I want to go shooting. And then he like looked at her. She's like, fine, you can go. But those are those types of things. Like, hey, in order to go out and do these types of things, do these types of events, you know, there's a lot of things that go into it. It's not just, hey, I'm just going to go out and hang out with my friends. You know, there's work before play, but we're also trying to incentivize the idea that the play aspect, what we're calling play, is like going out and hanging out with guys, having great conversation, because I didn't know where my head was at, truly, honestly, in the beginning. Like, okay, how do we bring up Christ? How do we do it? It was so natural. Like, most of the guys wanted to bring up where they're at, you know, oh, okay. Oh, this person's brand new to Christ. Oh, this person, like, we had 2 guys that are less than a month back in the church and, you know, kind of exploring Christ. And I think this might have been, like, if I would have had this experience with a group of Christians rather than the church experience, I'd be like, I like Christianity. These guys are good, you know? And I just like the support that each one had given them spoke volumes of what a group of godly men could do for one another, because that is, again, lacking. And I think it's a solution. And I think if you are a guy and you're listening to this, or you've come across this, like, you need to start to figure out, like, hey, what can it be? Because it started with somebody who was just outgoing enough and that said, hey, let me get some guys together and let's go and do this. And there was enough guys. We started with 10, and like everything we ever do, people cancel the day of. Hey, I got something else going on. This happened. It turned down to 6. And for those 6 guys that came in, we had a ball. We had a great time.
You know, it's funny, like just thinking about that, just the aspect of guys and stuff, and reading through, me and my son have been reading through 1st and 2nd Corinthians. And there's a part where Paul talks about, hey, if you're single, stay single. Right? He talks about that, I think, in 1 Corinthians. It's like, I get why, because it's like, just go out and do the work, and then like have the playtime with your friends and guys and the other disciples. And like, that's what he's doing. He's out preaching the word and doing what he's supposed to with all of his friends. Like Timothy and Ananias and Apollo, like, dude, they're all just out there preaching the word. And like, because they got to be screwing, like, on the trails, like, to Macedonia and wherever else, Asia Minor, they're going, like, they got to be messing around with each other and, like, throwing rocks and doing whatever. Like, there's playtime involved in that. Yeah, they're preaching. It's like, that's just what guys need. It's ingrained in us. Like, look at Paul, the greatest apostle, is like, yeah, if you're single, just stay single. It's so much easier and it's so much better. And I get it from the perspective of, like, yeah, because you just get to have this guy time, which is so beneficial and healthy for you all the time.
Well, I mean,
but if you're married, don't get a divorce.
No. But I think his argument for that one is like, hey, to do the work of Christ, like, if you're not married, it's going to, but if you can't refrain from loving somebody, I think it was
the desires
of man's heart, then, go after it. Right. And so there's so many arguments around that piece of writing, which is, a whole other podcast. But that whole topic is good. Like, hey, there's a season for a lot of these guys, what it means to be single, what it means to kind of have a group of guys around you, because I know personally, I'm one of the most blessed people on the planet, because I've got 6 guys. Like, I saw a TikTok today, and it was like, if you were to die tomorrow, who's the 6 that are carrying your casket? And I go, there might have to be a few more people shoulder to shoulder, because I think there's a few more guys in my life that would want to be carrying the casket, because they're good friends of mine. It's like, oh man, only 6? And then, like, the video ended with one guy holding a casket, dragging it. And I was like, dude, that's sad. Because, like, in my head, I was like, I got more than 6. But then there was, in the video, it was just one guy, like, dragging it. I was like, dude, that kind of broke my heart. To see that, like, oh, if I were to go off tomorrow, what a guy is thinking to himself is that there's maybe only one person, and he's dragging my casket on the ground in the street. I was like, dude, that's not a visual I want for any guy ever. And I think, like, the body of Christ is meant to lift each other up, bring each other along, and, like, literally take people on a journey on the road of salvation, And so the more that we're able to do these things, we're going to accelerate our lives personally. And then the impact of it is going to be, it'd be crazy.
Yeah, it's, you teach one guy how to live a life worthy of living, and he's gonna teach another, and it's gonna multiply, and it's gonna keep going. It's like, something I'm gonna start saying now is like, build your foundation, right? Go find those 6 guys, build that foundation of your core group of people, and that will set in stone who you are, and the people that you're around, and that'll set the tone of your life of, hey, this is our core, and we all believe the same thing, and we're on the same mission, and we're going to get married and have kids, and our kids are going to be on that same mission. And, like, build that foundation of that tribe around you, because it's so important. As much as you want to go find a wife or whatever right now, it's like, make sure the people that are around you to support you, like, do you have that friend you can call at 3 a.m.? You got to build that first before you can do anything else.
Totally. And it's like, there's no age limit on any of this, I guess we'll end it with a story, but I had this whole thing when I was a counselor back in the day. I worked at a camp in Montana, And it was literally the beginnings of me falling in love with nature, because I think I was like 23 or 24. And I was one of the oldest, yet least experienced, because I was going to Montana, where a lot of kids every single summer is outdoors.
It's a lifestyle.
Yeah, it's going out into like the Jewel or Glacier National Park. Like that was just something that they had done. But for me, Grand Canyon's 4 hours away. It's not really all that magical. Camping wasn't really a part of my life. But that was when I fell in love with the outdoors. And one of the things that I did there was I saw their teaching material, and it was like question 1, question 2, question 3. And I was just like, this is dumb. I had done ministry before, whereas 24 years old, I had traveled the country. I had done children's ministry. I had done youth ministry. I'd led a lot of that stuff. So I was looking at their curriculum being like, none of this is going to work. And when we go on these like backpacking trips, so I did a backpacking trip. I did a kayaking trip with mountain climbing, which I'd kayaked before, but I wasn't a mountain climber, so they brought another guide in. And I was the only male leader, and the group was split male, female. And every single night when it came time for the devotional or the study, which was usually forced upon the kids, I'd be like, hey, well, let's split it up so that the girls can have girl time and the guys can have man time. And man time turned into an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, where it got to the point where the girls were like, where are the guys? Like, had we gotten eaten by a bear? But we were just so engrossed with conversation that the next day, guys couldn't wait to clean the dishes, do all of their responsibilities so we could go out and do man time, where we just sat underneath the stars and like talked about life and where they were going, what they wanted to accomplish, like where they were at currently in life. And we're talking 14, 15, 16-year-old men, boys, but it was so different. But again, I got back from that camp and got in so much trouble because the female counselors were so upset that I broke protocol, which was I went away from the discussions and we just talked about what guys wanted to talk about, and we broke down walls. I mean, I talked to kids about like my mental health, my depression, all of that stuff, where other kids were coming out saying I struggle with that. And then like another kid was like, I've been dealing with that too. And it broke down so many barriers. And these kids who were friends before they came to camp were better friends when they left camp, because they actually knew where they were at. And one of them was, I didn't know this, but his uncle or something like that was like on the board of this camp. And so when I got in trouble and he was just like, hey, what's going on? I was like, oh, dude, we got in trouble for having man time. He's like, what do you mean you got in trouble for having man time? I was like, dude, we got in trouble for walking away from the group and like having our conversations that we did. And I wouldn't tell the girls what we talked about because I respect that. He's like, hold on a second. Walks over to the boss lady, has a conversation with her, because he had been to this camp since he was like 5 or 6 years old, like whatever the earliest age that they let him go into. And he basically had told her, he goes, this is the first counselor that has ever invested in me. This is the first counselor that showed me that I needed to have an active relationship with Christ. And this is the first time in my life I want to read the Bible. And the lady was like, oh. And if he's getting in trouble for that, I'm going to get every single one of these guys over here in about 5 seconds. And we're going to have a conversation about how great this weekend was with Chris as our counselor. And I was just like, man, I've never been more proud of a 16-year-old like going to bat for me. But at the exact same time, it was just when you put Christ into a perspective that isn't the weak Christ that a lot of things get portrayed as, and you portray Christ in the manly, godly, facilitating meekness that we're supposed to present Christ as, dude, the vision of what a man can do it's endless, man. And so I really enjoyed like that part of my life. I look back on those weeks where we were able to break out and do those like man times as some of the best times that I've had discipling young men in my entire life. And the fact now that we were probably going to be doing this more, I'm so jazzed for, so excited.
So true, man. It's so awesome. Yeah, it's like, why have we put Jesus in this box of like this Fabio looking glowing holy person walking around? It's like, dude, he was flipping over tables and fashioning a whip and like talking to the Pharisees, like talking smack. Like, he wasn't this like flowing hair dude. He was tough and rough and bearded. You had to have a beard. Like, come on.
Standing up to things like, it is not my time. Like, just that phrase alone is like, it's not my time. Like, the man knew what was coming, and he's just like, I'm willing to accept that, but what you've got for me, what you think you have for me now, it ain't my time.
Like, he carried a cross. Like,
oh,
come on.
Yeah. After being, oh man, the crucifixion story, man, that is brutal.
Truth. Yeah.
And that's our Savior for you. Willing to do all of that. That's the agape love, man. That sacrificial love, which is so important for, I think, young men to kind of, again, learn about.
Truth, yeah. Well, that's a good story. I think that fits as our outdoor story for the day.
Oh, it was a lot outdoor, but we always carried a bear can spray with us because we were in bear country.
As you should, yeah. In Montana, yeah, you have grizzlies and all kinds of stuff there.
Yeah.
And wolves now, yeah.
All that fun stuff. So, all right, man. Well, thanks for checking out the podcast today. Again, if you are a young man, like, reach out to your people. Like, simply, Ishmael is the reason for what we had done. Be the guy that wants to go out and do something and kind of facilitate something. Plan it, put it on the books. Reach out for it, and then try and schedule some stuff. Like, be the one that is kind of proactive with that. And we are a 501c3, fieldfaith.org. And if you guys are ever looking towards something, you can always reach out to Luke or I on that comment section, info@fieldfaith.com.
Yep. Or send us a message on social media, TikTok, Instagram, fieldfaith.org. Whatever you guys need. Because you have no idea. I mean, just stepping up and putting something together, you could be that Jesus figure for somebody that saves them,
Totally. And I mean, the seasons are changing. As it gets hotter in Phoenix, it gets nice in the woods.
That it does. It is fishing and camping season.
Yeah,
right upon
fishing in camping season. And again, it takes planning, man. It really does. And to get people on board with it, it takes some time. And so we wish you guys the very best in any way we can help facilitate. But if your church is looking for something with a young group and you want some guides to kind of help out, we'd be happy to do that probably too.
Yeah, reach out. We got it.
Have a good one, y'all.